Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Richard Tucker, Executive Director of Jefferson Land Trust, and I want to welcome you to the first installment of Discovering the Forest. Here at Jefferson Land Trust, we've learned that people love to get together, and it's important for us to gather. Unfortunately, we can't gather physically, so this year we've discovered a new way of bringing people together. First, through our Nature in Your Neighborhood series, which was 8 weeks in the spring, and now with this 4-part Discovering the Forest series. We hope you will enjoy it. A lot of work has gone into this, and we want to welcome you to this presentation. We've got a good crowd today. You're in capable hands with Rebecca and Heather Harding, and so I just want to say welcome and thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask us when this is over. I appreciate it. Thank you. And now Sarah Spaeth, the Director of Conservation and Strategic Initiatives.
We acknowledge that lands that we strive to preserve are within the traditional indigenous tribal lands of the Sklallam, Chimacum, and other indigenous peoples. We acknowledge that these original stewards have been here for time immemorial, and that European colonization irrevocably changed their homeland and ecosystem, effectively destroying their access to traditional lands for hunting, fishing, harvesting, and living. Jefferson Land Trust strives to deepen our partnership with the descendants of these peoples and steward the land using age-old principles of reciprocity.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Well, folks, we are happy to be here connecting together in the interweb for a new and wonderful experience together. So for those of you who I don't know, my name is Rebecca Koronowski, and I'm the engagement coordinator at Jefferson Land Trust. And I want to start out just like I always do for these events with a couple of tech updates to make sure that we're all having a good experience. So first and foremost, if you are having any tech trouble or need support throughout the event, down in the bottom of your screen, if you're on a computer, you may need to tap the button or tap your screen if you are on a tablet or other device to have the controls come up. And down in the center of your screen, there is an option for chat. You may need to push the 3-dot menu to get the chat menu to pop up. And that's where we will be communicating with each other in the chat there. So if you have any questions, that's the place to send them. And it looks like Richard just sent out a chat there. So if you're seeing the alert, that's where to do it. As we go through most of the presentation today, we will be keeping everyone on mute so that we can hear the speaker's voice. And down in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you should be able to turn on or off your video using the start and stop video button. And that option is there for you if you prefer not to be on camera for the presentation. In just a moment here, I'll ask you all to turn on your cameras so that we can wave to each other and say hello. And so down just one over from the left is the start and stop video button. So let's go ahead. I'm going to stop spotlighting my face, and then in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, hopefully I'm pointing in the right direction for you as well. Hopefully that's to the right. There's the option to switch to gallery view. It may show up as a set of 9 blocks. And so let's all go on over to gallery view, have your cameras turn on, and let's do a nice big hello and see who's all in the room with us together. Oh my goodness, thank you all for being here. We're really excited to have you all present. Hello, hello. Amazing. So through something that we want to just start out with to get to know you all a little bit better in your tiny rectangles on my screen is just to ask you a couple of questions by way of a poll to figure out where you're tuning in from. So I'm going to launch this poll for you. And you can just click the button on your screen, either by using your mouse or tapping if you're on a tablet, to let us know where you are tuning in from. That could potentially be somewhere different than where you normally call home, but we're curious to know where you're all joining us today. And so I can see the results are coming in. Thank you, everyone, for answering the question. I'll give it just a few more seconds to have all of the answers chiming in. Ooh, someone wrote in the chat, Arizona. That's fun. And yeah, if you want to add any more context, feel free to put that in the chat there as well. Okay, I'm going to close it out so you can all see the results. So it looks like most folks, 55% coming from Port Townsend. That seems to be expected given that's where the hub of the Land Trust is. But we also have quite a few folks from out of Jefferson County coming in second place. So yeah, if you want to put in the chat where you're coming from, we'd love to know. And then I have another question for you. And this one is a multiple choice, so check all that apply. We're curious to know what type of involvement or connection you've previously had with the Land Trust before coming to this event. Mark says he's coming from Seattle, but that he loves Jefferson County. That's great. Okay, this one's a little bit harder of a question because there's multiple choices, so I'll give you just a few more seconds than normal to answer it. I guess for all of the staff joining, you guys have to be other. I didn't include you there, so my apologies to the staff. So I'll give just a few more seconds. Oh, this is fun. So many good things that you all are involved in. So I'll end the poll now and I will share the results with you. So not too surprising, the majority of you are previous Nature in Your Neighborhood participants, which makes sense given that we are on the same platform that we were on for Nature in Your Neighborhood. I also want to give a big shout out to the 24% of you who this is the first time that you're participating with the Land Trust. Welcome, and we are so happy to have you with us. I'd like to also acknowledge our Tidelands to Timberline alumni, our previous participants. We're also really glad that you are all here. And so for the folks who have been in Nature in Your Neighborhood or have been in Tidelands to Timberline previously, just to give a little context, this program will be quite similar in some ways to those programs, but it also will be a little bit different in that instead of thinking about natural history exclusively, we're going to take just a little bit of a shift and focus a bit more on how we as humans interact with nature, and specifically forests, given that this is discovering the forest. So just a little bit of a tweak, but having been in those programs previously will definitely give you some context for some of the things that we're going to talk about. And so with that, I am going to pass the mic on over to Heather Harding, who is a longtime volunteer for the Land Trust and co-creator of this program, Discovering the Forest, and also Nature in Your Neighborhood. Without further ado, take it away, the amazing Heather Harding.
There we go. Hi, everybody. Welcome back for those of you I've seen on here before, and welcome to all of our newcomers. Our email invitations have been inviting you to learn about forests. And we've talked about this being an online learning series, and it is, but we have a new spin that Rebecca was referring to. It is so much more than just learning about the forest. It's about learning about each other and coming together as a community to interact with the forest. This series was conceived because a core team of people at the Jefferson Land Trust have been diligently working behind the scenes for the last 10 years to protect their largest property yet on Chimacum Ridge, that is right in the heart of Jefferson County. And so anybody who've been to Port Townsend, you go by Chimacum Ridge, and we'll talk more about where that is. This vision of Chimacum Ridge includes an opportunity to collectively preserve, enjoy, and prosper from the bounties of this protected land through a concept known as a community forest. So many of you may not have heard of that concept yet. It's really a bigger deal on the East Coast and not so much here in the West. But don't worry, we're going to be unwrapping that throughout the series in the next 4 months. And we're starting that process today. The purpose of this series is to deepen our shared understanding of forests and what a community forest can be, and to use that understanding to shape our vision of the amazing opportunity we have for community involvement on Chimacum Ridge. We have the perfect person to introduce to you Chimacum Ridge and tell us a little bit more about this amazing opportunity that has been created in the background by the people at Jefferson Land Trust. So that person has already spoke to you with the land acknowledgement, Sarah Spaeth, and she opened our program today. And she has nearly 25 years working for the Jefferson Land Trust. And she has helped farmers, foresters, tribes, partner organizations, agencies, and the community to preserve more than 16,000 acres of working farms, forests, and fish, and other habitats in Jefferson Land Trust. Her current job title with the Land Trust is Director of Conservation and Strategic Partnerships, and she has helped to spearhead the protection of Valley View Forest and its neighbor, Chimacum Ridge. Sarah?
Greetings, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and see all of your faces. I'm also very excited about this project. I think it will be the biggest project I've been involved in my 25 years, and maybe for the rest of my career. 10 years ago, the Land Trust worked with the community to craft a 100-year conservation plan. And one of the things that that conservation plan really highlighted was how important our forest landscape was to us. And since that time, we've really been working to highlight that as a part of our mission. Now, you probably heard recently that we opened our Valley View Forest. And the Valley View Forest is a 65-acre piece down in Chimacum off of Center Road. And some of you may have made it there to walk the trails and just really enjoy it. And today we're going to have a virtual tour there. This Valley View Forest is really kind of a little piece of what this grander vision we have for a community forest in Chimacum. And that opportunity is really to protect the 850-acre Chimacum Ridge, which is directly adjacent to the Valley View Forest. And you can see on this map that Rebecca's put up, there's a long, narrow piece that is next to Center Road, and really is the tie between the agricultural valleys of Center Valley and Beaver Valley, where we not only have our rich farms that produce food for us, but it's also where Chimacum Creek has very important habitat for the salmon of our area. And really this idea of a community forest on Chimacum Ridge and Valley View Forest is part of this integrated watershed approach, fish, farms, and forests. So this opportunity to create a community forest on Chimacum Ridge is still off in the future. We have helped to protect the ridge from clear cutting and from residential development, but it's not a community forest yet until we acquire that property in 2023. And it's at that time that we really envision the forest being of, by, and for the community, for recreational uses, for educational uses, and for local forest economies. And we have a purchase and sale agreement to buy this land in 2023 and really recognize that vision. And we're very excited about that. So the ridge that you saw, it's kind of nestled between these two beautiful valleys of Beaver Valley and Center Valley, and next to Valley View Forest, which is so critical to this long-term vision of Chimacum Ridge Community Forest in that it provides the public access point to ultimately the whole series of trails and Chimacum Ridge Community Forest. Right now we have the new trail system that's on Valley View Forest, and I'm very excited to have Geoff and Linda here to kind of introduce us to all the possibilities that that forest has and all the wonderful habitat and values that the forests of our area provide.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that introduction. And we're going to be hearing so much more about this project. And to do that, we're going to start off with discussing the question, how do we know a forest is healthy? We have to come up with some way of getting to know what a community forest is. So that way we have to explore what a community is and what are the elements of that community. And so one way we're going to do that is by studying the forest, studying how we can help the forest, and studying our community and what we need from the forest. And we have put together 4 different series, 4 different programs in this series, and each one is going to be guided by a question. And today's question is oriented around how do we know a forest is healthy? And we're going to be asking 2 local authorities on the subject, Geoff Hammerson, who's going to be up next, and then Linda Dacon, who will be speaking about salmon and the absorbing factors of forests. And then we are going to hear from other parts of our community in a mosaic video. We've already asked them this question and they're going to tell us what their answer is. And then we're going to put it out to you and ask you what you think about this question, how you would answer it. So this is very much a community process that we're doing together. So first up is Geoff Hammerson. He grew up in Northern California and he has a PhD in biology from University of Colorado. And he has worked 31 years as a research zoologist for the Nature Conservancy and Nature Serve. And he has led many groups on natural history, explorations from Alaska to Antarctica. And he is also a core organizer for Tidelands to Timberline, which is our natural history course that the Jefferson Land puts on every spring, and was very integral in Nature in Your Neighborhood. Also another natural history course that we put on this spring. So with no more ado, please welcome via Rebecca, who's going to share a video of Geoff Hammerson. That's to you, Rebecca.
Thanks, Heather. So just to give a little context, the video that we'll be sharing with you here today is a video that I recorded. I followed Geoff around in the forest. We took a field trip out to Valley View Forest that Sarah and Heather were just referencing. And I got a chance to listen in to hear what Geoff had to say about how he knows a forest is healthy. And so now I'd like to share with you the same experience. And so this will be a bit of a longer video, so tune in and be ready for all that Geoff has in store for us as we explore Valley View Forest together.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm Geoff Hammerson, and we're at the Valley View Forest in Chimacum today for a little walk and talk about forest ecology and what makes a healthy forest, what makes a resilient forest. And we've got some trails that we can take here. If you look at the entrance sign here, informational stuff, there's a nice trail map and field guide that we can use. And we'll get started right away here and head up the trail. And we'll talk about several aspects of this forest in particular, but in general, how we would look at a forest to determine whether we think it's in a healthy condition and whether it has the resilience to adapt to change that we might be expecting. So let's go on up the trail and take a look. Okay, one aspect of forest health is the species that are present. We would like to see a forest with different kinds of native species, trees, shrubs, undergrowth, and we would like to see an absence or an insignificance of some of the non-native invasive species that can cause some stewardship problems and ecological problems on the site. But we'll look around here, and this is very nice. We've got lots of western red cedar scattered around, big trees, smaller trees. There's Douglas fir on the other side of the trail over here, and next to it are some western hemlocks. Close to me over here, there are several big leaf maples, a deciduous tree that lost most of its leaves already. On the ground, it's just littered with beautiful golden leaves of big leaf maple. We've got some red alder, another deciduous tree. So a good representation of native species of trees that you would expect to see on a site like this on the lower slope of Chimacum Ridge is where we are really. And as we walk along here, we'll be looking to see if there are any non-native invasive species that we would like not to see in a healthy forest. And right here, I don't see any. And maybe as we go along, we'll check in again to see if we've found any. But right now, it looks good. Perhaps invasive holly plants would be something that invades some of the forests in this region, but I don't see any of those here, so that's good. Anyway, that forest composition of a healthy diversity of native species and the insignificance of the invasive ones, and we're looking really good here. So another aspect of forest ecology is not only the species that are present, but also the structure of the vegetation. Is it like a plantation where all the trees are the same age and they're widely spaced and maybe growing vigorously, but it's a very uniform looking condition? That's actually a very depauperate kind of forest. What we'd like to see is more diversity in the sizes of the trees, the ages, having an undergrowth layer, having some dead wood standing, some logs on the ground, things like that. So we look around here, we've got some, here's a little opening. It's got some young trees in it, some young western red cedars there, and some salmonberry there, some red elderberry. We've got some deciduous trees that are very branchy. We've got some big conifers, like this is a big western red cedar here that's one main trunk that goes way up. We have an old decrepit snag here, a dead standing tree that's just about ready to fall over, but it's been probed into by woodpeckers. So we got a good diversity of structure here, and that is important for wildlife because it provides opportunities for different kinds of birds, for example, that prefer like shrubbery versus tall conifers, or some of them love to forage. Some of our songbirds love to forage in among the deciduous foliage that grows up in the forest canopy, where others like to be up in the evergreen foliage. So we've got a great diversity of structure here. We look around here, maybe not close by. We don't have very many logs on the ground here, but that's another component. Forests, as they age, the trees fall over after they die or get blown over in a windstorm, and that provides even more habitat. Here we've got a lot of sword fern in the understory, but here and there, scattered around, there are other things that add complexity to the vegetation and opportunities. You might have Pacific wrens living and foraging among these sword ferns, one of their important and favorite foraging habitats, looking for insects. And then when the salmonberry has fruits on it, you'll have some of the songbirds feeding on those, and they're attracted to a different component. So the diverse structure of the forest is important, as well as the diverse species makeup. So we're on a slope here in the Valley View Forest, and we're looking around to see what evidence of ecological processes that might be involved in generating some of the diversity you might find in a forest. Disturbances, as you will, if you will. And here, for example, we've got a tree that's been blown over and is just lying on the ground, so it serves that function we talked about earlier about logs on the ground. But it also creates an opening. Here's another one. Standing, looks like a western hemlock, broken off at the top. Probably a windstorm, maybe the same windstorm that broke that one, knocked this one over. And in any event, it's created a little opening here, a little extra light, and has provided a different kind of habitat than in our adjacent forest that is heavily shaded by mature trees with a continuous canopy, leafy canopy over the top, so it's very shady underneath. So you might think of a windstorm, oh, it's caused this damage in the forest, but it's actually a very important part of forest ecology and generating the diverse conditions that allow different kinds of organisms to thrive. And here we've had a bit of disturbance, but as you can see, it's still quite a nice forest here. And over time, other species may be able to move into this area, although in some of these areas that have sword fern in such densities as we see here, it becomes difficult for, let's say, some of the shrubs to become established because of the dense shade and dense root networks of the ferns. But the cavities that form in snags like this will be attractive to woodpeckers and all the small cavity nesting birds that depend on the holes made by woodpeckers. They're quite important to a forest as well. Stopped along the trail here just to take a look at a couple of the representative tree species that you can identify fairly easily just by looking at the bark. On my left is a Douglas fir, and this one is maybe 14, 16 inches in diameter, and it shows the very deep grooves in the bark that are characteristic of Douglas fir in relation to one of its common associates, western hemlock, which is another large tree that grows in the same forest but doesn't develop those deep grooves. At most it might be slightly furrowed, maybe a little more than this sometimes, but relatively smooth looking and finely grooved compared to the deep, wide grooves in the Douglas fir. I also wanted to mention things on the ground. We mentioned logs earlier. Here's a chunk of bark that has fallen off of one of the trees, and it provides cover for small animals. And we don't really want to have a forest floor that's devoid of this kind of thing. So this woody debris that is lying on the ground is important as a habitat. Didn't see anything remarkable under this one, but if you were to come here during a warmer period of the year or when it's wetter, it's kind of dry right now actually, you might find a salamander under there, or perhaps one of those yellow spotted millipedes, or other kinds of small wildlife that depend on cover like this. So these are fun things to look under, but they are important habitats, as I mentioned, so you want to make sure that if you're looking under logs or rocks or wood, try to put them back exactly the way they were so that little microhabitat stays intact. You don't want to rip it apart and just toss it aside, because those conditions under there take a long time to develop. So try to get it back pretty much the way you found it. We've moved down the trail a bit and come to an area bordering looks like a seasonal stream down in the distance there. You might not be able to actually see it, but bordering it are a lot of tall deciduous trees like big leaf maple right here, and also next to it are red alders. And since most of them have lost their leaves at this point, you look up there, you can still see some of the foliage up there, but there's a big light gap. So a tremendous amount of light coming to the forest floor here compared to just opposite us, where the cedars and hemlocks and Douglas firs are crowded in there very densely. So again, the diversity here creates different kinds of wildlife habitats and also plant habitats. You find different kinds of things thriving in a sunny area, like some of the fruiting shrubs like salmonberry. There's some down there. You'll see those in these openings, but if you look back up underneath the canopy where the evergreens are, and it's much shadier, the understory is a lot more sparse with fruiting shrubs, for example. So a different kind of habitat, even though they're very close to each other. All right, we are in the Valley View Forest, but we're very close to the boundary of another parcel that the Land Trust refers to as the Chimacum Ridge property or project. It's an ongoing project of more than 800 acres of forested land and diverse wetland habitats that are just up this slope here. And the boundary between the Valley View Forest here and the Chimacum Ridge property is just over there on that slope. And that brings up the point of size and landscape context as being important things about forest health and resilience. For example, this parcel, the Valley View, is 65 acres. If it were just 65 acres in the middle of urban development, that would be one thing, but its presence next to several hundred acres of forest habitat makes this property even more resilient and valuable, because the populations that are here can interact with those in the greater forest area that extends next to it. That's a really important thing. So events that may cause damage to aspects of this forest and require revegetation of plants or recolonization by animals, that's so much easier if you have continuity or connectivity or corridors connecting forest parcels. Here it's very excellent setup because the two preserves abut one another and there will be no gap once that whole project is done. They will complement each other and become each one more valuable as a result of being next to the other one rather than being isolated. So a really great project to put these two pieces together. I was talking about logs on the ground, and here's a small one. It's a dead tree that blew over probably in a windstorm, and it might have been so decayed that it didn't take much wind, but here it is on the ground, in contact with the ground, and it serves lots of functions. It's might look a little messy to have all these logs on the ground and scattered around, but they're really important to the forest health because they provide habitats for things that need cover and moisture. For example, little salamanders live under these and make this their habitat. Shrews, red-backed voles love to scurry along these logs underneath and beside them. And the logs also hold moisture in dry spells, so some of the invertebrates that need that moisture can have a refuge during the summer dry spells. And it also helps the water that falls during rainstorms slows down the flow and avoids situations where you might have erosion if there was no cover. The leaf litter does that too, obviously. It's great at holding the moisture and then releasing it more slowly into the watershed. Oh, cool. We found a Douglas fir that has been extensively fed on by pileated woodpeckers. And you can see what they've done here. On this side there are some deep excavations, but if you move over to this side a little bit, they're gigantic. This excavation is like 7 feet long and a foot wide. And here's another one that goes very deeply in toward the heart of the tree. And what the woodpeckers are going for here are carpenter ants and sometimes beetle larvae. I've seen them take both. This is a carpenter ant colony. Well, it's not here anymore, but it was inside this tree, and the woodpeckers detected it and went in there and fed extensively on that colony and probably wiped it out. But a very important feeding habitat for these big, beautiful woodpeckers, and depending on standing dead trees. So this tree is broken off at the top, died during its decay. It was invaded by the carpenter ants and other insects that attract the woodpeckers, and they've done a lot of feeding on this. Probably done now with this tree, but you can see by the extensive excavations that it was providing quite a bit of food at one point. I've seen pileated woodpeckers do the same thing with decadent dying red alder trees that get often beetle grubs out of those that are about that long, big fat things that make a good reward for all the work that goes into these excavations. Like most forests in Washington, this area has been logged in the past, and you can see evidence of it scattered around by these stumps that are here up on the slope all around, but it's a resilient landscape and has become reforested in a very beautiful way. But Even those disturbances like logging, or it doesn't have to necessarily be a logging project to cause stumps. Sometimes the trees get blown over, but they create opportunities. So here we have some red huckleberry that has been rooted on top of this stump here and is growing down through the center of the stump, and eventually might reach the ground with its root system. But nevertheless, right now it's a pretty large plant and is thriving in a habitat that, when it became established, probably that was just a bare stump here, no other roots to compete with, lots of moisture in the rotting wood here, nutrients, so a great spot for it to get started. And how did it get here? Probably a bird ate huckleberry fruit somewhere. Who knows? It could be anywhere that a bird could fly in an hour. It could be many, many, many miles from here, and landed on this stump and either defecated or regurgitated the seeds from its meal, and that huckleberry seed germinated here and gave us this. All right, we're out here in the rain shower in the Valley View Forest, and we've been pointing out the beautiful native forest that's here, in very good shape, very complex forest with lots of different kinds of habitats within it, and microhabitats on the ground and in the trees. And its favorable context in the landscape, being connected very tightly with Chimacum Ridge off in this direction. And one consideration that we want to always keep in mind too is the use of the property and the stewardship of the property. And here it's pretty much a matter of avoiding things that might cause soil erosion or excess damage to plant life or disturbance of wildlife behavior. And by having a system of foot trails through the property, that's pretty much allows people to appreciate and enjoy the forest in a very undamaging way. We've got pretty much that addressed here. We're not going to have motor vehicles tearing up the hillside here and causing erosion problems, or scaring off all of the wildlife with that kind of activity. So the question here is, how do we proceed with a forest like this to keep it in a healthy, resilient condition, and as something that engages the community in other ways as well. And I think the future episodes of this series will be talking about some of those things, what the plans are for maintaining this in its present and future condition. One thing we have to remember is that things are always changing. There could be events that occur that cause changes here, and over the long term, climate change is one of those. How do we adapt to those things? How do we think about that? How do we make this a resource in other ways? So, as I said, in the future, some of the discussions in this series will be talking about those things. All right, we've come to the end of our hike in the Valley View Forest, and just to sum up things, we look around and we see a beautiful forest with lots of native species that we would expect to see on a site like this. No impact of invasive plants. We've got natural processes going on here, natural disturbances, trees fallen onto the ground, bags standing here. We've got trees broken off and providing different kinds of habitats for animals. We've got a big forest here that's adjacent to an even bigger forest, which makes its resilience much better. And we've got the Land Trust acting as stewards for this property and guaranteeing that for forever this will be taken care of and function as a beautiful, valuable resource for the community.
Thank you so much, Geoff Hammerson. We appreciate your expertise and all that you contribute to the natural history programs. Every time I listen to you, I learn more and more. And I especially appreciate your shout out to the little creatures that don't get enough attention, all the invertebrates and the salamanders. Anyway, everybody, Jeff's on the program today, and we will have a chance to do a question and answer with him and Linda later. So keep those questions in mind. Some of what you were saying reminds me of one of the teaching tools that I used on my natural history tours that I do as a profession. And I learned this from the National Park Service. And it's an acronym called OWLS. And the O is for old trees. So you have to have big old trees to have a healthy forest. And the W is for woody debris, which you talked about a lot, with the downed trees and the bark that has all the habitat for creatures to live under. So that's OW, and then the L is layering, which is lots of different size trees, old, young, in between. And then S, in order to have a healthy forest, you talked a lot about the snags that need to be there because they're the condominiums for all those cavity nesters and animals that make their living off of the food inside of the snags. So owls, old trees, woody debris layering, and snags. And next up, we are going to hear from Linda, and we like to have a lot of diversity in who we hear from and also how we hear from them. So Linda is going to be live on our program. We wanted to give you the Valley View experience, so we recorded that with Jeff. But this is going to be live. She's going to do a presentation for us. And I got to know Linda as part of my guide training. I offer training for people to learn how to be interpreters and talk about their passion to people in a meaningful way. And the Land Trust sponsored a guide training to focus on Chimacum Ridge and the kind of messages that we want to get to the public about this project. And Linda was in that training, and everybody had to do a presentation as part of that training, and hers was about salmon and the forest. And so she was the perfect person I thought of. And Rebecca was there too, so we both thought, Linda, yes, to talk about how do we know a forest is healthy for salmon. And Linda is on the board of directors for the Port Townsend Marine Science Center, and she also is a docent there, and she has a passion for the Salish Sea, and that all comes together for her with how salmon and forests interact. So take it away, Linda.
There we go. Okay. Hi, thank you, Heather, for that introduction. Greetings, everybody. I want to share today with you the story of the salmon forest. We're going to start our journey in the forest. If you've lived in the Pacific Northwest for a while, you know that we measure our annual rainfall in double-digit inches here, usually around 20 inches a year. But what does an inch of rain really mean in practical matters? Well, to a 918, which is approximately the Valley View Chimacum Ridge size, to a 918 acre forest preserve like Chimacum Ridge and Valley View, the stream that has salmon is a long way down the hill in the valley from this ridge. There are no streams that run up and down the ridge, except for occasional streams during the wet season. So the salmon are a long way down. And we know that water runs downhill, so it's more nuanced than that inch of rain. So let's back up a little bit and talk about what an inch of rain really translates into. I started looking around for information, and the US Geological Survey came through for me and told me that an inch of rain on 1 acre of ground equals 27,154 gallons of water, which kind of made me shake my head just a little bit. I'm picturing it in 1 gallon containers. That's a lot of 1 gallon. And that's just an inch of rain. So let's do the math. Let's do some more math. So 27,154 times 918 equals 24,927,372 gallons of water over the Chimacum Ridge Valley View area for 1 inch of rain. That's a lot of water. The people of Port Townsend use about 1.3 million gallons of water a day. So that 24 plus million, almost 25 million gallons of water is 2.5 weeks worth of water for Port Townsend. So when I started doing all these things, these numbers really impressed me. And so it led me to think about what happens when that rain hits the ground. So are we ready for our poll, Rebecca? We have another little poll that we're going to do here.
Here it comes.
Okay.
So our question is, did you see a puddle during your last walk in the forest that wasn't on the trail? So think back to when you were last hiking in a forest and think about if you saw any puddles, and if so, were they on the trail or not? And Linda, we will keep the poll open for just a little while here to keep collecting the responses
Okay.
that are coming in.
Okay.
And I'll be interested to hear you
I will
decipher
press on here. I will press on.
So
One of the reasons that, oh,
I'll
go
share
ahead.
the results with you right now.
Okay.
We have 75% of folks said no, and 25% said yes, that they did see a puddle in the forest.
A
that was
puddle.
trail.
Okay. One of the wonderful things about characteristics of healthy forests like Chimacum Ridge, and what makes it important, is its capacity to soak up enormous amounts of water. And we just went through the math. There are phenomenal amounts of water coming down on that beautiful forest. And to absorb this water and release it slowly, and Geoff talked about that a little bit, to keep it from rushing downhill and carrying debris and silt and things into the stream. So I have a kind of a fun way of illustrating this. Bear with me now. We're going to do the we have the magic sponge. Now we're going to hope that this doesn't go all over my desk.
So what are you doing there, Linda?
I am slowly pouring water on my amazing sponge. And it is, for the most part, soaking right in. We have a few little puddles on top. My sponge is very dry, and this is the same thing that happens to dry soil until it gets wet the first time. And then once it does, this is a cup of water, and if things are going to work right here.
How much
My
water are
sponge
you
is being
pouring, Linda?
I haven't poured that much in. I'm just getting my cup started here. now I've poured in about 1/4 cup of water. And my sponge is not cooperating here. Rebecca, you saw my sponge work before, didn't you? There we go.
Yes.
Okay. I'm putting water in the top, and I don't know if you can see it, but there's no water coming out at the bottom. I've poured in 1/2 cup of water to this sponge, finally, slowly starting to drip. I will end up, which I'm not going to make you sit through, pouring a cup of water on this sponge, and it will soak up that and more. And it's doing exactly what a healthy forest will do, and that is absorb enormous amounts of water and let it go slowly. And in the process, it's going to not only absorb the water, but it's going to filter the water as well. Okay. Oh, now my sponge is working. Okay, go absorb. So the forest is filtering the water, cleaning the water, and sending it downstream so that juvenile salmon have a clean place to shelter. It's kind of a Goldilocks moment, because what it does is it sends that water, all millions and millions and millions of gallons of water, down to the streams like Goldilocks. It's not too hot, not too cold. It doesn't come in too fast. It doesn't come in too slow. It just creates a good place for salmon. So now we have kind of the forest part of the salmon forest. Let's talk about the salmon. And how do those salmon, besides the connection of the forest makes it good for the salmon, how did the salmon make it good for the forest? We already determined that the salmon have no way to swim upstream in places where there are no year-round streams. And yet, if you look, and I think Geoff would say the same here, if you look at the tops of trees that are growing by healthy salmon-run streams, you're going to find evidence of salmon in the tops of those trees. Salmon hatch in their natal streams, we know that. And they spend their time, a few years, growing there. And they move down to the bays, and they perform an amazing feat, which is worthy of another whole topic, which is change from a freshwater fish to a saltwater fish. And then they take off to the ocean, where they swim for years, feeding and hopefully growing fat and healthy, so that they'll have the strength and energy to swim all the way back to their natal streams and start the process again. And in making that remarkable journey from the stream to the ocean back to the stream, when they come back, they are full of nutrients. They're like a conveyor belt for nutrients that the forest needs. And these nutrients are oddly, usually in short supply, or often in short supply in forests in a natural way. These are phosphorus, nitrogen, and things like that. These are the kind of things we add to our gardens. I don't know how many of you have vegetable gardens, but you'll often go out there to your soil and test your soil to see what you need to add every year to make your garden very fertile. We know that many of the salmon don't make it to their spawning grounds, being caught and eaten along the way, for doing their job along that route as well. And the fish that do spawn successfully and die in the process are contributing all that is left of their lives to the health of the forest. How? Well, You can imagine on Chimacum Ridge, that might start with a bobcat, a coyote, an eagle, a raven, any one of dozens of other smaller players who catch salmon or feed off of their spent bodies after they have spawned and died. Eventually, the remains of those salmon are processed through all of these animals and bird digestive tracts, like Geoff was talking about, but still contain a lot of critical compounds like nitrogen and phosphorus, and they're pooped out onto the forest floor. And the bugs and bacteria finish the job, continue the processing. So you can see now how this is getting into the trees. So the healthy forest, here's my healthy forest sponge here, is still absorbing like crazy. The best way the forest could get the things it needs to grow really strong and green is to have the help of salmon, the invaluable help of salmon. We can tell by taking samples from the tops of trees. Biologists, botanists will tell you that. You can find the key components of salmon in the tops of trees that are nowhere near rivers or streams. And the animals are carrying that up when the salmon have died. So the trees are telling part of this tale as well. So the salmon are doing the heavy lifting for forest health. They're, like I said, they're like a giant conveyor belt of nutrients, bringing the ocean to the forest by way of fish. And the streams in return are recharged every year with water filtered through the rich biodiverse micronutrients or microuniverse, of the forest floor biome, and ready hopefully to hatch and nurture another generation in the fishy future that the forest depends on. And I'd like to end with a quote from a book by Dale Stokes, The Fish in the Forest, Salmon, and the Web of Life. Mr. Stokes says, when the molecules of what was once a salmon find their way to the tops of trees and into the flesh of animals far removed from the ocean, rivers, and streams where the salmon once swam, and when the actions of the salmon themselves can be seen to shape the very landscape on scales that span hundreds of kilometers and thousands of years, it becomes very difficult to distinguish where the salmon begins or ends. So the story of the salmon forest is a story of the interconnectedness of the sea and the land, a story that serves as a metaphor for all life on Earth. So here we go. Salmon and trees.
Oh, thank you, Linda,
Thank you.
so much. How's your sponge?
My sponge is still absorbing.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. Your presentation just there was rich with metaphor, both with the sponge and I know in conversation that you and I had previously, you had referred to the salmon as 18-wheelers that carry the nutrients back up the watershed. And I just love that image of the salmon being able to be the transport for what the forest needs. So let's take a moment now. We're going to transition into a bit of a Q&A session with both Linda and Geoff. And so I put in the chat down there that you can send your questions into the chat and we will pose them to Linda and Geoff. And so there we go. There's Geoff too. Come on into the club. We'll get everybody on screen. So the first question that we have from one of our audience members is over to Geoff, and they are asking, how do controlled burns for fire control work with the need to keep cover for soil and small animals?
Well, in the forests around where we are here on the Olympic Peninsula, we're kind of in a little different situation than some of the more flammable forests that exist, say down in California, where they have much more severe fire conditions there that we have up here. So really management of forests around here with fire is not so much an issue as it is in other places. Another thing to think about though is the use of fire actually to create non-forested areas was actually a bigger historical event or technique that was used around here to create openings in the forest rather than the forest itself around, even on the east side of the peninsula here is, you know, it can be somewhat dry in July and August, but it's a pretty soggy place. And normally when the wood rots, it gets awfully wet for much of the year. And so we don't have so much of that issue. I'm not sure if I'm answering the question in the way it was intended, but it's just a brief answer. I could do a little follow-up if I haven't covered the question quite the way it was asked.
Yeah, I'd encourage the person who asked the question, if there's further clarification, go ahead and send that on in. There's a question that just came in that's kind of related to that. So maybe to get at more of the question there. Is it possible to have too much of a shrub and downed branch layer on the floor of a Doug fir and western cedar forest? And so this person in particular is speaking about a small residential forest that's nearby where they live.
Well, okay, so that really gets to the question of, is there just one kind of healthy forest? And the answer to that is no. There are lots of different ways a forest can be healthy. And if you just think of yourself going to, let's say up in the national park along a river valley, lots of trails through those kinds of habitats. And what you see is this tremendous diversity of conditions that is the natural state of a forest when it's allowed to undergo the natural processes that normally go on. You have big trees that have broken or fallen down in a windstorm and have created this massive jumble of stuff that you have to hike over, around, and through. It just makes it impossible to move. And you think, oh my God, you know, this is like way too much. But then you move a couple 100 feet down the trail and you have this lovely open understory with big tall trees and nothing underneath. So, you know, I'm not sure I could actually say that there's one definition of what's the right amount of undergrowth or ground cover to have. You have to ask what your intentions are, or what, you know, for that particular parcel. To me, I love to see all that stuff on the ground because it's such a rich habitat for the kinds of things that I enjoy seeing, wildlife, for example, birds and mammals and all kinds of conditions. So, you know, you have to put it in the context of, well, where is this in relation to other things? Is it a place where you want to maintain access where people can walk through it? Then you may want to open up it, you know, a little bit. But to answer that question, you really have to know what the intentions or priorities are for that land.
Great, thank you, Jeff. Another one for you, Jeff. How come termites don't colonize live trees?
They like dead wood. Well, they're different kinds of termites, but around here, it seems like they're mostly in rotting logs. And have you seen those big emergences of termites that occur once in a while where they just come streaming out of these logs on the ground? That's their habitat. You know, it creates a condition, a dead tree creates conditions that allow the termites to create little galleries that they raise their young in. And so decay is a friend of the termite. And the termites take advantage of that little habitat. And then they themselves become, as they emerge and go off on their mating flights and reproduction and create the new generation of termites, are also providing a lot of food. If you ever seen the birds really going after those termites when they come out. So yeah, that again, that dead wood on the ground habitat is creating a direct habitat for other kinds of things like the termites, but then they themselves become a resource for other kinds of things like birds that enjoy eating flying insects. I've even seen Bonaparte's gulls picking off termites over the marsh down by the boat haven. It's pretty impressive to see that.
That is super cool. So another question, and perhaps Linda, we can start with you, and Geoff, maybe you'll also want to chime in on this one. Not all forests have salmon streams to feed them. What do other forests use in place of the salmon?
I think Geoff needs to answer that one. I'm not, I don't, no, not all forests have salmon, but they do have native animals and flora and fauna and birds and things like that. And some of the phosphorus and so forth comes from those animals in terms of them eliminating, they eat, their bodies process the food. And I believe that bird feces are high in phosphorus, but I don't know that for sure. I'd have to go do some research on that one.
There's all kinds of stuff going on. A lot of it's subtle. You walk through a forest, and as Linda pointed out, if you're near or even miles sometimes from a salmon stream, the effect of the salmon is there, but it's not really very obvious to, you don't see, oh, well, there's evidence of salmon. It's subtle. And a lot of the processes that are important to forests are subtle like that. For example, the movement of migrating animals creates waves of resources, nutrients that are taken from one forest and delivered to another. For example, migratory birds are a really good example of that, where they're eating, whether it's insects or fruits that have been produced by the shrubs in a forest, for example. Well, they're gorging themselves in one place and often flying off and depositing that material somewhere else. And other birds are arriving on that same forest and delivering things there that weren't there before sometimes, and creating all kinds of inputs, not only nutrient wise, but species, introductions of native species that may have, for whatever reason, locally become rare or depleted in some way because of some event. Well, this is a way that they can be rejuvenated. So there's all kinds of things going on in a forest that aren't really evident to the naked eye as you're just casually visiting. But if you spend a lot of time watching animals and what they do and how they move around and carry things, foods with them, and food storage is another thing. A lot of animals store food and they move it from one place to another, maybe on a local scale, but sometimes it's more than just local. Anyway, so there are, I would say, thousands of processes going on in a forest that, of which salmon are a very important one in the Pacific Northwest especially, but there are lots of other examples as well.
And animals have big ranges. Some animals have really big ranges. Some of the larger predators, can have miles and miles and miles of their own territory. So if they feed near a stream and then they go off, 10, 12 miles away, they can carry that with them and leave it behind.
Yes, well, thank you so much to you both. Unfortunately, we are going to have to move on to the next segment. So for anyone who typed in a question that didn't get it answered, please hold on to it, maybe bring it to your breakout group, We can continue to have discussion via the chat. So if anybody wants to chime in and answer a question that has already been put into the chat, feel free to do that. But we have a couple more things in store for you all that we want to make sure we have enough time to get to. So thank you again, Linda. Thank you again, Geoff. You all are awesome, and we are so grateful to have you as a part of this. So Heather,
Well,
what are we?
thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Geoff and Linda, for going the extra mile for forests and teaching us about them. We want to hear from as many voices as possible about this question. One of the things we learned a lot from you, Linda, and Geoff is how important diversity is. And that applies not only to forests, but also to our community. To be a healthy community, we need to have diverse voices be expressed. So we have a couple more formats that are going to bring some of those voices in. The next one is what we're calling a video mosaic. And we put out to some people in our community the question, how do we know a forest is healthy, including Geoff and Linda? And here's what they had to say. We asked them to finish the sentence, we know a forest is healthy when, ... And then Rebecca put it together, stitched it together into this mosaic. Play it for us, Rebecca.
My name is Eric. I know a forest is healthy when I see lots of different kinds of trees together in the same area. So behind me, I'm here in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor. I see some Douglas fir, some red cedar, some grand fir, all living together next to a stand of some red alder down there. So all them living together helps me see this biodiversity as part of its resilience as a healthy forest. And I also see a lot of nice understory here. There's a lot of sword fern. There's a blackcap raspberry right there. There's some snowberries, some ocean spray, even some rhododendron back there. So that complex understory also is a representative of a healthy forest for me. And I'm just noticing some English ivy climbing this tree. So that's invasive and that can make an unhealthy forest. So I'm gonna go take care of that.
I know a forest is healthy when it is diverse. Lots of different species in the trees and in the understory. There's a lot of wood on the ground of the forest. There's lots of habitat. There's snags, there's critters, there's birds, and there are no invasive species.
I know a forest is healthy when I find some of these guys.
Hi, I'm Mallory Weinheimer. I'm owner and operator at Chickadee Forestry, and I know a forest is healthy when there's a mix of native species, both in the trees and in the understory. When there's birds, you can hear a flicker here in the background, and the appropriate wildlife that should be there at that stage, and when there's people to care for it.
So a forest is healthy when it sounds like this.
I know that a forest is healthy when it exhibits a diversity of species, ensuring resiliency into the future. And on a personal note, I value having these living classrooms to bring hundreds of students out every year and watch them engage in the miracle of being alive on this planet. I thank our partners at Jefferson Land Trust for all your work. Continue on.
How fun to hear from all of those folks. What a wonderful idea. So I definitely heard a theme, and I'm curious if you all heard a similar theme to what I was hearing in those responses. And so the next thing that we'd like to do with you all, if you have participated in nature in your neighborhood previously, you'll know that we like to use the Zoom function of breakout groups. And this is a tool that we have available to us to take the 75 people who are present at the meeting here and break you out into smaller sections so that you can have an opportunity to chat. And for anyone who is deciding that the breakout groups are not for you, I just want to say thank you all for being here. We do have some good stuff to chat about. So if you are able to stick around for another few minutes, we would love to give you all an opportunity to chat. So the way it will work is that I will automatically move you all into a space where you can all chat together. And that way you will not have to click on anything or push any buttons, and we will put you into that space. And Heather is going to tee you all up with a question to bring to address. And I would also just like to add in there to think about what the themes are that you heard from the presenters that we've heard from thus far today. So Heather, what are we going to talk about in our breakout rooms?
So going back to our guiding question, how do we know when a forest is healthy? We're going to pose that to you in your breakout groups, but now you have had something more than these presenters have had, which is the cumulative experience of listening to multiple perspectives. So we'd like you to do just what Rebecca said, just synthesize what you have heard and get a note taker, somebody who will write down your ideas. And we want you to finish the sentence. We know a forest is healthy when. And have your note taker write those things down. And then when we come back on, that note taker will write them in the chat. Unfortunately, if you write them in the chat while you're in the breakout group, it goes away. It's just a chat for your breakout group. So as soon as we come back, write those in the chat, and then we'll read some of them out loud. So you're gonna go 3 people per group and just talk amongst yourself what your impressions are. We know a forest is healthy when. When what? All right, Rebecca, send us away.
Hey everyone, welcome back. The return from the big breakout rooms is always my favorite part because you all are always smiling and so happy to have just gotten a chance to talk together. So best part of these meetings is seeing all of those smiles on your faces. So if you have something that you'd like to share to kind of summarize a little bit of what you talked about in your breakout groups, please type those into the chat so that we can all see them. Just a quick summary of some of the ideas that were popping up in your discussion. And yeah, I'm curious if anybody wants to venture to guess at what the theme that I was noticing was throughout the rest of the presentations. I know in my group, Eileen got it right away. Here come the answers. There's a lag, right? You all have to type before I can see them. Yes. So let's see, we'll read some of these. A healthy forest may be a function of which ecotype you are looking at. Very good point, Dave. Leah writes in, a healthy forest has a diverse understory. We can hear birds. Lichens are present because they can indicate good air quality. Stay tuned. In February, we'll talk even more about lichens. Woody debris are present. I am so sorry about that, folks. We had a 4-legged critter that decided that he wanted to open the breakout. Yes.
Is that Kevin?
About that, folks. What else are you seeing, Heather, in the chat there as far as things that were coming out for people? Heather, you are still on mute. Thank you to the folks writing in that they love cats. I also love them too.
Let's see. I saw, let's see. We love cats, right? Well, in our group, it was diversity, enlivened feeling, magical, enough water, and a feeling of joy. And I was the one who invited the people to do the video mosaic. And so I was trying to encourage people to say their emotions and intuition. So as well as science, because that's how we know a forest as much as anything. So I was appreciating that in our circle. Because mostly we've been focusing on science today, but there are many ways to know a forest is healthy other than having knowledge about its biodiversity. You can feel it.
Yes, that's exactly what I also responded with, is the emotional connection, the way that it makes you feel, and how you can feel connected by being in the forest. And a lot of that has to do with all of the things that we were just talking about today. So we're already a little over on time, so I just want to point out one quick thing to you all before we leave today, for those that are still here. So on the Jefferson Land Trust website, if you are interested in visiting Valley View Forest, we have information on how to get there and all of this great detail about what you can do and how you can explore and connect. So if you go to protective properties and go to Valley View Forest, I'll also type in the URL for you here, but I know a few folks were asking about how they can show up and explore this special place. And so the other thing that I want to show you on our website is that coming up, we have more events in this series. And so the next question that we will explore is, how can we help healthy forests thrive? And that will be on Friday, December 18th. So please do come back and join us and bring any questions or ideas that you have been inspired to think in between now and then. And we will be sending out all the links, as we always do, to your inbox. So if you haven't already signed up, go to saveland.org/discovering to get on the mailing list to make sure you get all of the juicy details for what's coming up. And I think with that, I'll pass it on over to you, Heather. What are we going to do in the meantime?
So in the meantime, we want to invite you to be part of our video mosaic for the next 3 sessions. And we're going to send out a describer to tell you how to do this. But the first one, we just asked our community if they would contribute to it to give you a model of what it looks like. But now we're going to cast a wider net, and we're going to send this out to the community at large. And we're going to give you the next 3 questions to answer, and you can answer 1 or 2 or all of them. You might need a little tech help, and we're here for that. But the next question coming up, as Rebecca said, is how can we help healthy forests thrive? So you are going to be able to help out answer that in the next 2, and just have to video yourself. It should take 5 minutes. So 5 minutes of your time will help our community learn from many voices about how we make help healthy forest thrive. So thanks so much. I think I'm going to let it go back to Rebecca to close it out today. And I look forward to seeing you next time on December 18th.
Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you later. Bye.